welcome to the officials of the East Port of Spain Development Company Limited, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, members of the media, and members of the public. I am Lakram Bodo, Vice Chairman of the Public Administrations and Appropriations Committee. Welcome. The Committee on Public Administration and Appropriations, the PAAC, has a mandate to consider and report to the House on the budgetary expenditure of government agencies to ensure that expenditure is embarked upon in accordance with parliamentary approval. Secondly, that the budgetary expenditure of government agencies as it occurs and keeps Parliament informed of how the budget allocation is being implemented. And thirdly, that the administration of government agencies to determine hindrances to their efficiency and to make recommendations to the government for improvement of public administration. The purpose of this 27th public meeting of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee for the 11th Parliament is to seek further information on the expenditure and internal controls of the East Port of Spain Development Company Limited as it pertains to the following: the budgetary expenditure of East Port of Spain Development Company Limited, the oversight mechanisms in place for monitoring and evaluation at the East Port of Spain Development Company Limited, hindrances to their efficiency, and to make recommendations to the Line Ministry for improvement of public administration. The East Port of Spain Development Company Limited compliance to the State Enterprise Performance Monitoring Manual and the internal controls that govern the East Port of Spain Development Company Limited for the fiscal years 2017-2018 and 2018-2019. The committee is desirous of hearing from the key officials of the East Port of Spain Development Company Limited and the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development to discover the challenges being faced and to determine possible solutions to these challenges. The role of the committee is to assist the company to achieve the efficient delivery of services while ensuring that expenditure is embarked upon in accordance with parliamentary approval. This meeting is being held in public and is being broadcast live on the Parliament's Channel 11, Radio 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Viewers and listeners can send their comments related to today's inquiry via email to parl101@ttparliament.org, facebook.com/ttparliament, Twitter @ttparliament. So again, I would say welcome, and I invite the representatives of the East Port of Spain Development Company and the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Deputy Chairman. My name is Newman George. I'm the Chairman of the East Port of Spain Development Company Limited.
Good afternoon. My name is Deborah Thomas Austin, and I'm the Managing Director of the East Port of Spain Development Company.
Good afternoon. I am Himnat Ramuta, Deputy Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. I'd like to take the opportunity to apologize for the non-appearance of my Permanent Secretary, who was to make an appearance at the court representing the Ministry this afternoon.
Good afternoon. I am Jeff Ferrez, Program Coordinator at the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development.
Good afternoon. I'm Ms. Nina Antwine, Senior Economist at the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development.
Good afternoon. I'm Nissa Huston, Finance and Administration Manager at East Port of Spain.
Good afternoon. Rennie Mohan, Procurement Officer, East Port of Spain Development Company Limited.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Aberdeen. I'm the Projects Manager of East Port of Spain Development Company Limited.
Thank you very much and welcome once again. I'll now invite members of this committee to introduce themselves, starting on my right.
Clarence Rambarat, member.
General Antoine, member.
Wade Mark, member.
Amrita Devanarayan, member.
Good afternoon, Ayana Webster Roy, member.
And I'm Lakram Bodo, Vice Chairman of this committee. Mr. Newman George, perhaps I can invite you to make an opening statement at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Chairman. The East Port of Spain Development Company Limited was incorporated on September the 28th, 2005, in accordance with the Companies Act 1995, and is a body wholly owned by the Government of Trinidad and Tobago and is an agent of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. The company has been operational since April 2006. At present, and since our appointment in December of 2016, the company comprises of a board of directors, 3 in number, which is to be increased to 8 by virtue of a cabinet decision of January 4th, 2019, and a staff complement of 20, despite the fact that the organizational structure requires a complement of 40. The company's mandate is to develop and redevelop a zone defined as East Port of Spain by improving the economic, social, and physical environment of the area, which area is bounded by Charlotte Street in the west, Lady Young Road in the north, including communities of Mova, Never Dirty, Caledonia in the east, and Beetham Estates, Sealots, and Kantanga in the south. From a detailed scan of the wider contextual environment within which the company operates, and on an examination of its internal operating environment to identify its strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and constraints, emanates the overall strategic goal, that of an improved quality of life for all residents and stakeholders of East Port of Spain. This strategic goal gives rise to 5 strategic objectives, namely sustainable development, safety and security, economic development, environmental sustainability, and operational efficiency. Specific operational goals and strategies and clearly defined action plans will enable the company to achieve its strategic objectives and overall goal. The company also translates its goals, strategies, and action plans into a series of development projects for implementation. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Perhaps at this stage I can invite the Deputy Permanent Secretary to bring some opening remarks.
Thank you, Vice Chair. As you know, the Accounts and Appropriation Committee would have requested written responses to which the Ministry would have responded and to which East Port of Spain Development Company Limited would have responded. We're here now, hopefully, to help to clarify any other issues that you may have. We are at your mercy.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure whether you're at our mercy, but hopefully we'll have some very fruitful discussion over the course of the afternoon. Before I commence any questions, I just want to state that the chairman of this committee has chosen to recuse herself from this particular sitting. Chairman, if I can invite you to respond in terms of, now you mentioned that the overall goal of the company is to improve the quality of life of the residents of East Port of Spain. Can I ask you whether you are satisfied that the work done by the East Port of Spain Development Company over the years has improved the quality of life of residents of East Port of Spain? And if so, perhaps you could give some examples of how that has occurred.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Yes, to your first question, ever since my appointment in 2016, I found improvement in the quality of life, yes. Not to the extent that I would have preferred. We have, and to give an example of some of those would be For example, some people in Laventille weren't using modern-day facilities for waste disposal, sewage disposal. We have been since prior to my time, and during that period, we have been facilitating them by changing that mode of disposal. And that is one area. We have also been involved in a lot of social work, where there are programs for what people term, the name is
Community impact centers.
like community impact centers, where we could conduct our social programs. Also, annually, we embark on a program called Construction Skills program. We also embark on a program, Youth Entrepreneurship. So all of these programs assist us or help us to alleviate and improve the quality and standard of the people in that area.
Thank you. I know part of your goals as well would be to effect some sort of transformation overall in the area. Would you care to share with us, what your goals would be in that direction?
Deputy Chairman, I will now ask my Managing Director to say a few words on that.
Thank you, Vice Chair. The mandate of the company really is to seek the transformation of East Port of Spain, seek to achieve the transformation of East Port of Spain. And we have a byline, transformation through regeneration. So part of the way we do that is by the physical regeneration of the environment, and that is done through a series of development projects, which designed to improve the infrastructure conditions in East Port of Spain, physical and social infrastructure. And so bit by bit, we have been improving the quality of that physical infrastructure network. So when we started, we would have done some analysis of the area, which would tell us that there are significant infrastructure deficiencies in terms of the quality and layout of the physical infrastructure. So over time, we have been improving on that, not just through the gradual elimination of pit latrines and replacing that with a septic tank and soakaway system. But we've also been improving the quality of roads, where sometimes there are tracks or areas that were previously accessed only through steps. Those have now been replaced by roads that could take vehicular traffic and make it more convenient for the residents. Improving drainage to allow for better runoff and reduce incidents of flooding, which not only contribute to flooding, but they also contribute to erosion of people's properties. And you would have had a high demand for retaining walls because areas are being eroded. And that's simply because there was not adequate roadside drainage, or in some cases, guttering around houses to steer the runoff from the houses properly and into the communal drains. So we've done a number of physical infrastructure projects that have improved the facilities and gradually assisted in transforming the communities. Done a lot of work on recreation grounds and community recreation type facilities, so that there's an outlet for active engagement of the youth in productive activities. And not just in terms of physical work, some of our transformative work is also looking at changing the minds and attitudes of people, developing human capital. So Chairman mentioned one of the flagship programs that we've been doing for the last 3 to 4 years, and that is the Construction Skills Training Program, equipping the residents to better be able to take advantage of job opportunities in the area. We've been working with the young people through this Youth Entrepreneurship Program, and we have a series of community impact centers in about 6 communities through the area, and through those centers we offer a number of social and economic programs that develop the capacity of the residents.
Thank you very much for that overview, Managing Director. Through you, Chairman, if I can ask, in terms of what your vision would be for the area, or in terms of a target, can you state, maybe on a percentage basis, how much you think you have achieved in terms of where you're hoping to go? I know it may be difficult, but if you can give us some sense of what remains to be done.
Okay, so to take that question, I would hesitate to give a percentage. I think we have not we're just scratching the surface really of what needs to be done. So the work that we would have done would have emphasized the scale of the challenge in East Port of Spain. And I think we've been able to tackle some of it, but it's limited based on the funds that we receive in any given year and the projects that we are able to accomplish. So we are working towards a bigger picture of the vision that we have for East Port of Spain. But yeah, I would hesitate to commit ourselves to a percentage, but I think there's still a lot to be done.
Thank you. If I can just go into the submission with regards to the item of monitoring and evaluation in your submission. And there are just two issues I wanted to clarify. There's a table that is on page 5 of your submission and speaks to the theory of change as an introduction to developing and implementing a monitoring and evaluation framework. There's just two issues in that table with regards to the indicators. Are we on the same page? Yeah. And I know that with regards to financial, you've stated that you're looking at 100% projects within budget, but you also have a factor of 15% cost overruns. It seems to be some sort of contradiction. Would you care to explain the difference in those two targets?
Yeah. Ultimately, our goal would be that all our projects are coming in within budget. That would be the ultimate goal. But what we would settle for is not more than 15% of those projects going at cost overruns. And I think today we're way under that 15%. So we're closer to most of our projects being done within budget. Yeah.
The same column, Managing Director, can you share with us why you're aiming for 90% with regards to environmental protection, the last item on that table, as to why we have not been able to achieve, or you haven't been able to achieve 100% ISO compliant, 14,000 compliance.
And actually, you'll notice that item is in italics. That is something that the company would like to strive for. At the moment, we've not had the resources on board to tackle this issue as yet. So we've not started to work towards achieving that ISO compliance. It is something that we would like to, but our current organization structure does not have the resources to allow us to tackle that as yet.
Any idea how far away you think you might be from that target?
It all depends on the availability of operating expenses so that we can get up to the full complement of staff or closer to the full complement of staff that we have right now.
Thank you. As you mentioned, staff, and Chairman, you mentioned that you are currently operating with 20 staff as opposed to an establishment of 40. Can you share with us what effect, how is that impacting on the performance and the delivery of the organization?
Well, certainly, Mr. Vice Chair, not having the full complement, it means that there are certain activities that we are falling short on. If I may just go to the chart, what the chart is. Okay, for example, if you could I guide you to Appendix 3? Absolutely. You will see under our technical services, there's a position that is vacant, it's in red, Chief Technical Officer. So the Chief Technical Officer would be responsible, of course, for all the projects and so. And what is happening now is that in the absence of the Chief Technical Officer, you'll find that our projects manager has to fill in. Now, that is not an ideal situation, because, you know, it's himself to himself. So we will want the separation of those duties so that we can get projects off the ground or in train a little faster. If you look under the Manager of Finance and Administration, you'll see there are vacancies for an accountant and an admin assistant. Right now, we just have like the Manager of Finance, and she has to double up and do a lot of that work. So, you know, it is taking a little longer to get to where we would like to be.
Thank you, Chairman, for pointing that out. These would appear to be some very critical and key positions, you know, for you to be able to deliver your mandate. Can you share with us the challenge that you're facing in terms of filling these positions? Is it that you can't get people, or is it the finance, or the recruitment process?
No, one of the challenges, Vice Chair, has been in terms of the irregularities in the disbursement of funds to the company over several years. And so because there's that inconsistency in how much money you get, so there's a difference between the allocation and what we actually receive and then when we receive the funds. So sometimes it prevents us from implementing some of the things that we would like to. So you have on board, have in mind recruiting staff, but if you're not sure that you're getting the funds in the financial year, you can't make the commitment to recruit at the time. Over the years as well, we've had some challenges, with changes in administration and restrictions on entering into new staff contracts, so that sometimes delays the issue. Right now, we do have a proposal that has gone before the Human Resource Advisory Committee of the Cabinet for filling some vacancies and to get approval for the terms and conditions for those vacancies. So we are hopeful that that will be addressed soon.
As a general sense, I would have noted that all of your positions are contract positions. Would that be correct? Yes. So in terms of the issuing of contracts for these key positions, what would be the duration of contracts?
Most of our contracts are 3-year contracts.
So it would mean that when these contracts, so during the duration of the contracts, the employees will be there?
Yes.
When the contract is an
contracts
end.
are renewable, subject to satisfactory performance.
All right. Just one last question before I open up to the other members of the committee. I just wanted to ask, when does the company anticipate that the monitoring and evaluation framework will be developed and implemented fully?
Again, that is dependent on, I think we've now taken the decision that we would probably bring in a consultant to assist in setting it up. We had approached a couple of years ago the Ministry of Planning and Development. They were very much interested in agencies setting up a monitoring and evaluation framework. Unfortunately, they didn't have the resources to assign staff to help us to do that. And so the recommendation was that we would have to use consultants. So that was one of the other things that we had to wait until we would have had the funding to bring on board a consultant. But we are in the process right now of finalizing terms of reference for that position to be able to go out to try to recruit someone to start working on a monitoring and evaluation framework.
Thank you very much. Member Rambarat.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And through you, Chairman, Managing Director, I took note of your comment that sometimes the subventions or the cash flow is not there to allow you to do what you're supposed to do, which immediately took me back to a newspaper report from December 2017 dealing with the disappearance, for want of a better word, of 16 million from this company. And I believe it's referenced in the submission as under an exercise that PwC eventually did. But 16 million represents maybe 2 years subvention. And I wanted to know how in a company as small and focused as East Port of Spain Development Company, $16 million in difficult financial situations, as you explained, how could that go missing and not be recognized by the management of the company?
Yes, and so, member, what we would have discovered once the issue was discovered and we went in and did our investigations and found out, we realized it had been going on over a period of time, so it would have been significantly more than 2 years. And perhaps the opportunity for that to happen comes about because of the fact that money is not received regularly. So sometimes we go through the entire financial year getting very little of the money, and then it comes in at a lump sum in July. And that might be, some of it might be recurrent funds, which cannot be spent between July and September. So it remains in the account that might be used to supplement our expenditure during the course of the next financial year, when something similar might happen. But we have recognized that there have been oversight challenges. Chairman mentioned that for a while, and again, we're in a similar situation where you have a finance unit of one person, so you do not have the oversight. And we've had a challenge with a small board or boards that may not have the financial expertise, members with financial expertise, to provide the required oversight. So from our forensic audit, we have identified several gaps which we have sought to close and taken steps to ensure that the likelihood of something like that happening again is significantly reduced.
But the PwC report, I don't know how familiar you are with it, points to the failure of the company to perform bank reconciliations. That is one. You weren't producing accounts for the purpose of auditing, but I imagine you were producing account management accounts. And I'm back to my question, because if you are receiving subventions on an intermittent basis, well, the disappearance of 16 million should be more evident. I don't see that, and Pricewaterhouse shares my view. I don't think that it is on account of the intermittent cash flow. It has to do with performance or failure to perform bank reconciliations. And in my view, the disappearance of a sum of that magnitude from an organization so small must point to significant management issues in this company.
Yes, and when you look at the results of the investigations and the actions that have been taken, and we know where the problem lay, then it explains itself, I think, a little bit better, because the problems were within the finance unit and the individual that had responsibility for those things. And it's not about, there are other responses that we can give. I think you'd see from the report that there's an active investigation ongoing, and so at this point it may be a little challenging for us to provide too many details in this forum.
I just wanted to ask about the company's strategic plan. I see you have a strategic plan being developed for 2017 to 2020, and it's been submitted to the line ministry. Can you give us an update as to where you are with that plan?
The document was submitted both to the line ministry and the Ministry of Finance, but we have actually not received any feedback from the ministry in terms of any comments or challenges that they have with it. So the company continues to pursue the strategies in the document at this time.
And as much as the Deputy PS is here, can I perhaps invite you, Deputy PS, to shed some light as to what may be the issues involved in the delay?
We can confirm from the ministry's end that a draft has been received, and it is subject to the approval of the Permanent Secretary and our technical officers and the Minister, in addition to some collaboration that needs to take place with the Ministry of Finance. As of now, my understanding is that having recently received the document from the EPOS, it is being reviewed.
Member Mark.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just want to follow up on the heels of my colleague's intervention, that is Minister Clarence Rambarat. Was a report, I'm directing this to the Managing Director, was a report prepared and submitted to the East Port of Spain Company, and I'm referring to a forensic report by PricewaterhouseCoopers, and if such a report was submitted, could you make such a report available to this committee? What I've seen are simply recommendations, but the report, can you make a copy of that report so that this committee could properly understand what would have happened?
Member Mark, that report was never submitted. EPOS is not in receipt of that report because that report was being used to conduct the whatever charges and investigations, which would lead to charges of that, and that whole, what we received from Pricewaterhouse were their findings and recommendations as to how we could avert something like that in the future.
Can I ask, Mr. Chairman, through you to the chairman, who paid for this report in terms of the forensic, and why didn't the Port of Spain, East Port of Spain Company receive that report? Who paid? How much did it cost the taxpayers? And why was that report not made available to the East Port of Spain Company?
Member, I don't have the figures in front of me right now. I'm not sure if you have the exact figure. The company paid for it. The company commissioned the report. We invited PricewaterhouseCoopers to do an investigation when the issue was discovered. So we paid for it. We met with them to go through their findings, and what they submitted at the time that was particularly relevant to us was their identification of the gaps that would have facilitated something like this and their recommendations for how those things should be addressed. And the company has systematically, since then, that report would have been submitted in January of 2018, has systematically started addressing all of the recommendations from PwC's, their list of recommendations. And we have submitted in this report all their recommendations and the status of management's response to them to date. So we have started implementing all the recommendations. Some of them would take a little bit of time to completely address all the problems. But the report was discussed with us, and it has been used as a basis for a civil action that was litigated against the former employee that was concluded in favor of the company in July of 2018, and is also the basis of an ongoing investigation at the level of the fraud squad at this time.
Did the East Port of Spain Company refer the report to the fraud squad?
We referred the entire issue to the fraud squad. The fraud squad had the freedom to contact PwC for any details that they needed, and they would have been supplied with whatever information they requested from PwC.
Could you share with this committee how long this exercise involving the disappearance of $16 million occurred in the company based on the report that apparently is a secret report at this time with the police?
So the investigations would have come initially from our own findings and gone back, which would have been verified by PwC. And we can see from the history of it that it would have probably started in early 2014, until it was discovered in September of 2017.
Would you supply to this committee in writing the cost of this particular forensic audit?
Absolutely.
I want to ask the chairman of the East Port of Spain Company. Tell me, you had said earlier, and I agree with you, that there was a vision for East Port of Spain. And this vision was manifested in a development plan. Could you tell this committee, as I understand it, surveys are done to update this development plan for East Port of Spain? What is the status or status of this development plan that gave rise to the East Port of Spain Development Company? What is the status of the East Port of Spain Development Plan?
Okay, so may I just offer a correction? The development plan did not give rise to the company. The company was incorporated in 2005 and became operational in April 2006. Since that, at that time, the company undertook a series of exercises to come up with to understand the challenges of East Port-of-Spain and to formulate a development strategy to achieve the transformation of East Port-of-Spain. So coming out of that work, the draft Strategic Development Plan for East Port-of-Spain would have been formulated in 2009 and initially presented to the government for consideration. That was done not too long after there was a change in government. We had tried several times to present the document again to take it further. What we have done in the last few months, under our current minister, when he came into the position, he has expressed an interest in us taking that forward to Cabinet. And so we have just embarked on an exercise to update some of the data in the plan. And when I say that, when the plan was done in 2009, much of the data, apart from what we did original surveys on the ground, we also relied heavily on data from CSO, which would have come from the 2000 census, being the most recent census available at that time. Since then, the 2010-2011 census has been concluded. It has taken a number of years for that census data to become available, and we are now winding up the process of using that revised that new census data to just update the data in the plan. It does not change the analysis or the conditions that we have found, but we need to just bring the data up to date with the most recent that is available. So that exercise should conclude by February, and then we would resubmit the document to our current minister for consideration.
You would agree with me, if I may continue, Mr. Chairman. I want to go to the issue of the internal audit and the internal audit function. You would agree with me that regardless of the size of the company, in this instance, maximum level of staff engagement ought to be, we are told, 40. You are currently operating with 20. The reality is that the internal audit function is very critical, not only to ensure that we are operating with some degree of efficiency, but risk associated with any organization has to be monitored very carefully. You have to be in compliance with the laws and the regulations. Now, the question here is this. We have seen from what you have submitted that the company apparently outsourced the internal audit function to, I think, a company called Peer, some Peer and Young. You could always get that corrected. Could you share with us whether that company is still performing that function? And could you share with us what is the annual fee that is paid to this firm to conduct the internal function of and on behalf of the East Port-of-Spain Development Company?
A member through the chair. The firm is Anthony P. Pear and Associates, was a firm that was engaged by the company in 2010 to provide internal audit services based on a decision taken by the board at the time that we outsource their function. And so we would have gone through a procurement process to invite firms to submit proposals on the basis of which those proposals were evaluated, and Anthony Pear and Associates was the firm selected to do that. They started, would have provided an audit charter, audit manual, would have started a comprehensive risk assessment of the work of the company. The company around, I think it was about 2013, merged with another firm, and we were advised that they were no longer able to continue providing internal audit services because the new firm would no longer provide that service. And so there was a break as well. We've also been challenged by changes in administration where there's a delay in appointing boards, and for a while decision-making is suspended. But once we had a new board, Anthony Pear came back on, they continued providing services, and then they had the merger. Following that, the board approved another procurement process to select firms to do that. That was done in 2014, and a new firm was selected based on an evaluation process. Interestingly, that firm was PwC. Again, breaks in funding and other things. They would have submitted their proposal, but we were not able to conclude and start the engagement process. It also turns out the issue that we had with financial irregularities, the person behind that was the company's accountant. And now we have realized that as we were instructing him to continue the engagement process with PwC, that was being deferred. So it's only when we went to them for the audit that we were able to find out he had not been following up with them as he had been asked to get that started. But we have since resumed that process with PwC. We have received their updated proposal and and engagement letter, and we hope that within the next few weeks we are able to sign off on that and resume a regular process of providing internal audit services, which the board and management agree, something that is critical to the functioning of the company.
I'll pause for the time being. I'll come back.
Thank you. Before I invite other members to ask questions, Chairman, I just wanted to clarify, you mentioned in your opening statement that there are 3 directors on the board, and you intend to, it is intended that they will go to 8 directors. No. So can I ask, for the sake of clarity, whether the board is comprised with 3 directors, is that legally comprised?
Yes, Chairman. 3 was just the bare minimum that the board took as a quorum for the board.
Right.
3 was.
And the full complement is going to go to 8, 9?
It's going to go to 8 as I have been informed. A letter was sent to me on the, I think it's the 9th of January, informing me that by, cabinet decision of the 4th of January, that we will have some additional members. They are yet to receive their instruments, and as soon as they do, we will convene a board meeting and have things in place, set things in train.
Thank you. Member David Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I would just like to move over to the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. Mr. Deputy PS, may I ask what was the budgetary allocation to the East Port of Spain Development Company under the development program between fiscal 2018 and 2019? And whether there was an increase or a decrease over the past maybe 2 or 3 fiscal periods?
Okay, I'm seeing that the allocation for urban development, it's 3 plus 12, 15 million, and that represents an increase. No? I would like to correct myself, sorry. It was the same. There was no increase, nor was there a decrease in the allocation.
The allocation in the current financial year, 2018 to 2019, is 12 million. Yeah. It was 10 million in the previous year for the IDF projects. The social and economic program remained at 3. Right.
So with your kind permission, would I be allowed to submit this for you in writing when we can verify exactly what the figures are? Thanks.
Okay, just a follow-up question, Mr. Vice Chair. To Deputy Permanent Secretary again, is there any mechanism in place to monitor the way in which the funds received by East Port of Spain Development Company is being executed, is being spent?
Sure, and I'm proud to say yes, there is. What the ministry has is what is called an Economic Research and Planning Unit, and there's an officer assigned at that unit for all of the expenditures that would be undertaken by the East Port of Spain Development Company. But in addition to that, what we have is a project manager who has been identified to seek the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development's interest in all projects. So that person goes there and actually makes a site visit to verify that the works have been completed as designed. But further, even as another part of the budget cycle, the Budgets Division would ensure that we meet the requirements that they specify so that we have to ensure that there's value for money. I can also add that very recently, a decision was taken at the ministry level for all of our agencies, and we provided them with a checklist so that whenever projects and payments come up to be made, a certain set of documentation will accompany the requests, and we ask them to faithfully adhere to those requests.
Okay, thank you. In reviewing the material that was submitted to us, I understand that there are project review meetings before the budget cycle, and during those meetings, you will evaluate the projects in such a way, and you will determine whether you all are going to cut underperforming projects or not, right? Is that correct?
Short answer is yes.
Okay. What is the criteria that you will use to determine whether a project is underperforming? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, it's determined by first of all, the project will have objectives, what it's hoped to achieve. Objectives are set for the projects. If the objectives are not being achieved, then we will decide not to go with the projects in the ensuing fiscal year. However, the success of the projects is dependent on the release of funds, and sometimes that could be critical. There might be some social situations as well that may contribute to it as well.
Okay. Could you say how many project review meetings were done over the period 2018 to 2019, and also what percentage of the total amount of projects for East Port of Spain Development Company was deleted because they were categorized as underperforming?
Can we ask to provide that in writing as well so that we get the correct information for the benefit of the committee?
Sure.
So my last question is, so subsequent to the further assessment of the underperforming programs, and maybe you may want to submit this in writing as well, I would like to know what those projects were and what were the main causes of determining whether it was underperforming by the ministry.
Okay, so I'm being advised that no projects were underperforming. And what I'm committed to doing is to giving you documentary status of the number of project meetings that were undertaken. Yeah?
Thank you. Before I invite Member Webster Roy, I just wanted to clarify, can you tell us under which sub-item the company receives funding? Can you give us that information?
It's A002, Social and Economic Program for East Port of Spain, and A001, Urban Redevelopment.
Thank you. Member Webster Roy.
Thank you. During the opening statement, I think, Mr. Chairman, you mentioned that part of your mandate is improving the social conditions of East Port of Spain. And Mrs. Austin noted that you have 6 community impact centers. I wanted to know the location of these centers, what type of programs are being offered at these centers, what sort of stakeholder engagement would have determined the type of programs, and then I'll go on to some other questions.
So the 6 centers are located at Beetham Gardens, Phase 5, Sealots, Basilon Street, True Macaque, Never Dirty, and Chinapoo. Those are the 6. There are a variety of programs that are offered, ranging from computer literacy programs to other sorts of skills programs, you know, whether it's fine dining and etiquette. We have a boxing fitness program. We have other kinds of jewelry making, upholstering, several programs, and these come about at the request of the community. So we have had a very elaborate consultative process that we have engaged with our communities of East Port of Spain since the company started, from establishing community working groups in each of the 19 communities, and there's regular interaction with the community. So they indicate the kinds of things that might be of interest to the community. We try to develop programs along those lines. Sometimes we offer based on approaches that are made to the company to offer services, and we put those to the community, and if there's interest, then we try to run the programs. So we have facilitators, sometimes from within the community, sometimes external facilitators, and the company funds that. So the residents do not pay for the delivery of the programs. So they might be things that run over a period of 6 weeks to 3 months or so, and we change up the programs as we go along.
Do you do any sort of impact assessment at the end to see how the community is benefiting from the programs? Yeah. And can you give examples of success stories, maybe entrepreneurs emerging from your training and your different programs at your centers?
Yeah, so take, for instance, one of the longest running programs is the boxing fitness program. And we started that in Beetham and Sealots. It has been expanded to the Basilon Street area. It's almost outgrown the impact centers because the boxers are at the stage where they need specialized equipment and to continue their training. We have, in the last financial year, just established a gym that's equipped at Basilon Street to facilitate the boxers from the 3 areas, the 3 communities coming together there. And the coaches that we engage on the program also take them for training at the stadium. And we've had some success stories with that, with boxers competing in regional events and bringing home gold and silver medals. So that's been very successful. The construction skills training program that the chairman referred to, actually, I think we had a situation where 2 of the graduates from the program, one element of that program is heavy equipment operations, and 2 of the graduates from that program formed their own company. And it turned out they connected with the chairman without knowing that I don't know if they knew, but they ended up doing some work for him at his home. And then in talking to them, he found out that they were graduates of the program. So we see people using the skills that they have learned to set up their business and to continue, which is exactly what we would want to do. And there are several other success stories in terms of, at one time we were doing a women's entrepreneurial development program with women from the Beetham and Sealots communities. And we had one person who was very much interested in developing her own catering business. And after we did the program, we took it to another level. So some of the women who wanted to take it further, we were offering almost one-on-one mentoring for them to develop their businesses. And this particular lady who expressed an interest in developing her catering program, we worked with the Hotel and Tourism Institute to get her enrolled in the program. She successfully completed the program. So we have a number of success stories that we can point to, and this is an initiative that has generated considerable interest and success. What we do hope to do is, as we develop our monitoring and an evaluation framework, to have a much more robust framework for doing that kind of analysis, collecting the stories and telling the stories about the successes from the programs.
That's excellent, and congratulations on what you've been able to achieve thus far. What percent of your budget for this fiscal is allocated towards social impact projects and programs?
Okay, and to answer that question, I need to go back. We've always been clear that part of our mandate is to develop economic, social, and physical conditions in East Port of Spain. And for a long time, we did not have a source of funds to tackle the social programs. So the money from the Infrastructure Development Fund can only be used for physical infrastructure projects. So it was not until probably about 2014 that we had the first allocation of funds specifically for a social and economic program for East Port of Spain. And the first time the funds were allocated, we spent the entire year trying to work out with the ministry how to actually access the funds. So we have got 5 million in 2015, and for the last 2 allocations, it's been 3 million. So the current financial year, we have $3 million allocated for the social and economic program.
Have a work program set out in terms of how you're going to use the funds allocated?
Yes, we have several categories of programs that we do. So in addition to the community impact centers and the various programs that we run there, we do some sports programs. So sometimes it's inter-community football tournaments that we bring people to bring the youth together. We might have that during the school vacation period. We have done an East Port of Spain 5 and 10K race on a few years that takes national runners as well as people from the communities through the area. We have a culture and historic program that we are trying to develop some of the sites of historic interest in East Port of Spain, identifying them and doing some development works on those. So for instance, we've been working with Citizens for Conservation to restore the stations of the cross at Calvary Hill. So we've contributed to that. And we've done something like community festivals so that we try to promote arts and culture in particular communities, giving the artists and the cultural elements within the community a chance to showcase their talent. So we've done that in the Movar community, and we're planning another one for this financial year.
And my other question is going on to the physical infrastructure development side of it. Mr. Chairman alluded to the, I think, pit latrine eradication program. How many homes now would have to come under the program so that all of East Port of Spain would be, would you be able to provide the information now, or you want to submit it in writing?
We may have to submit the figures in writing, but just to say that our analysis of the CSO data, when we first started pulling together data from the 2000 census, showed that in some communities you have between upwards of 40% of the households were dependent on pit latrines. In some communities, it was as high as 80%. The 2010-2011 census would have shown a slight reduction in those figures. So there is a large pool of families that need to be put on this program. And so far, for the 5 or 6 cycles that we've done about...
We have done about 300. 250 this
year, 320. So we would have done about 250 households already on that program, and we have another 70 that we plan to do during the course of this financial year. Yes.
Member Antoine.
Good afternoon. In your SWOT analysis and your tools matrix, you mentioned that one of your strengths in the community is community engagement, a strong community spirit, stakeholder engagement to build trust and support to replace the gang culture. And you said part of your policy was to use small contractors from within the community due to their familiarity with the people. And you identified about 39 physical infrastructure projects funded by the IDF. My question is, how many of these projects were done by small contractors from within the communities, and how many were completed on time and within budget?
In the last 3 years, we have done 60 projects in all, and in that, 16 of which were social, but only 44 being the infrastructure development project. Over 90, only of those period, only 2 projects, 2 companies came from outside of the community. And we could call another 2 being them larger in the community. But so outside of that, everybody else was small contractors. And the budget, they have all kept the budgets. We've always been within budget, but not necessarily within the time because of the level of disbursement that we get in terms of funding.
You also mentioned lack of support for small contractors who are often unable to secure line of credit from the commercial banks and may not have the resources to carry out projects that are not funded and the release of funds by the company. How regular this happened and how much it affected the small contractors?
And can I just add to what Mr. Aberdeen said? So the 6-day projects, because in the questions from the committee, you specified the period 2015 to 2018. So those 6-day projects would have been within that time frame. I think overall, since inception, the number of projects that we have completed under the Infrastructure Development Fund is probably closer to 130 projects. In terms of the small contractors, the challenge is when they cannot secure a line of credit, they are unable to carry the costs associated with completing the project without getting regular payments in response to the claims that they submit. So as it stands, the contractors receive a mobilization fee of 10%. They get started, and as they complete the works, they submit a claim for payment to the company, which we then submit to the line ministry to have the funds released to us so that we can pay the contractors. If there's any delay in receiving those funds through the line ministry, then it means the contractors do not themselves have a line of credit that they can purchase materials and pay workers and continue to keep the project going. So the risk for us is that the work stops. And with that comes a number of challenges. They cannot then pay their suppliers. They cannot then pay their workers. It can lead to unrest in the communities and unrest among the workforce with other consequences. So those are the kinds of challenges that we have, and sometimes it delays. Mr. Aberdeen said that while our projects finish within budget, they may not always finish within time because that can delay the project. It is never advisable, but sometimes it happens that the project stops and you may have to remobilize when the funds become available. So it is a significant challenge to us completing the projects on time.
Is this a regular occurrence or it's...
Unfortunately, it is.
Right. How many small contractors would have come out of this, this process as new contractors, or are they mainly old contractors who have been engaged?
No, I think, and Mr. Aberdeen, tell me if we have this information or we may be able to supply it. We have a number of new firms are formed because they recognize the opportunity to register with the company. So there are a number of new firms, and sometimes we find that the firms may not have a lot of experience doing some other types of projects, and so they may subcontract a more experienced contractor in the area, and that's how they start to get some experience. We have also run training programs that we've done for the small contractors so that they're better able to compete, for they understand the tender process better, managing their funds, their resources, and so on. So we've run programs that would have trained over 75 small contractors in various aspects of the business side of it, so that they're better able to compete for the tenders that are invited.
And so in your opinion then, the company has been a positive aspect of the situation in the communities and for the small contractors and the residents as a whole?
I think definitely so. Recently, we were able to work with some of those small contractors who did not even understand sometimes the banking requirements. They set up a company because they know that is what is required for them to get work. They may not understand all that they need to do to be able to complete the process to get bank accounts opened and so on. We've been working with them to help them do that. So we've certainly helped them to establish themselves and to grow to a point where they can not just get contracts from us. They now meet the requirements to tender for other projects outside of the area. And based on the feedback we get from the communities, we have done a number of things that people have been wanting to see done for a long time. We have generated a lot of goodwill within the communities in terms of how we operate, the work that we do, and the way that it's done. and the engagement that we have with the communities. I think that has been very positive. People have been excited about the plans that we have shared and that they have shared with us that have allowed us to develop the strategic plan. I think there's a lot of excitement about what could happen in East Port of Spain if those plans are approved and the level of funding increased to allow for the transformation of East Port of Spain.
Before I allow Member Rambarat, with regards to the small companies, can you indicate what is the financial capital that is required to define a small company?
That's required
to fall into the category of a small company. I'm just trying to get a feel of what sort of
Vice Chair, if I may add, none of the contracts within East Port of Spain go over about $2 to $3 million. So you have a range from as much as if a contractor was to get a contract to install one latrine, that is about $50,000. So it goes from as small as 50 to maybe about $2 or $3 million. So that's the range that we are working with.
Right. That's the value of the contract. So I was trying to find out what sort of financial backing a contractor would require to be able to bid for your projects.
We are not certain. It all depends on the value of the contract that he is awarded and how frequent his claims are and disbursements to him. Yeah, and recently, we were asked by a contractor to make direct payments to an individual, and we refused. We told him, listen, this contract was awarded to this contractor. It must be paid to that contractor. We even assisted him in going to the bank and establishing, this is what the managing director spoke about. So that kind of assistance we lend to.
Thank you. Member Rambarat.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm looking at the submission, the written submission from the company. I'm directing this to the managing director. I'm on page 6 now. At this time, by my reading, the company has 5 years of audited accounts outstanding. Those years would be 2013, 14, 15, 16, and 17. Now, in reference to your submission on audited financial statements, you say that the former accountant delayed and neglected to respond to the transmittals from the auditor and so on. So this is in respect of the 2012 accounts, financial statements and accounts. And then there is a reference to the termination of the services of the former accountant. So the first question is, when was the former accountant terminated?
His engagement with the company was terminated in December of 2017, shortly after the irregularities were discovered and the causes established.
Right. So the former accountant is being blamed for the failure to transmit information to the auditors in respect of the 2012 financial statements. And the dismissal takes place in 2017. So it means that I assume we've had problems with 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015. So that's the first point I want to make. The second point is that on page 12 of the submission, the board agreed to the engagement of PwC to perform the internal audit. Now, I could be wrong, but my own experience is that the relationship between the internal auditor and the company is via the board through the chairman. So that upon the board's decision to engage PwC in 2014 as internal auditor, communication would either have gone from the corporate secretary, which would be unusual, or the chairman of the board. But I heard you say that the accountant failed to communicate to PwC about their appointment as internal auditor. So I want you to explain that for me, because in November 2014, the board took a decision to appoint PwC as internal auditor. And that is a very important date or time, because the disappearance of the money, you say, started in May 2014. And I'm thinking that if PwC was appointed as the board director, they should be appointed in November 2014. This whole situation might have been avoided. So I'm asking whose responsibility it was to advise PwC of the appointment approved by the board in November 2014. One, that's my first question. Secondly, what was your responsibility as managing director to ensure that the board's decision of November 2014 was carried out? And thirdly, what was your responsibility as managing director in respect of the continued non-performance of the accountant from the period 2012 to the dismissal of the accountant in 2017? Those are my three questions.
And may I try to answer them in sequence. The responsibility and the board decision was to engage PwC as the recommended preferred contract service provider after an evaluation process. I think the board minutes specifically said subject to the availability of funds because of the challenge in getting recurrent funding at the time. So we would have notified PwC that they were selected, and we would have been waiting until we were clear that we had the funds to start the process. With the change of government in 2015, we were at a point where we had informed PwC and we were waiting on their engagement letter and their actual work program and so on. There was a bit of a hold-up in implementing that with the change in government and waiting on the appointment of a new board, which did not happen until December of 2016. And so there was a period where the previous board would have offered its resignation and felt that it was not in a position to commit the company further. So the action was not followed through. And so it was, in having notified PwC, it was then the accountant's responsibility to liaise with them to get the documentation from them so that we can sign off. And the responses that we were getting were, they're not yet ready, they're engaged in other things, we may have to wait. And so we didn't realize that there was a stalling tactic. So it's having gone to PwC, and then they were telling me directly the information that was being conveyed through the accountant, which was not the information that was being passed on. So there was that mix-up, but we had tried to make sure that everything was in place to engage them as directed once the funds became available. So I'm not sure I think there might have been another question that I may have missed.
There were two other questions. And the second question related to your role specifically in ensuring that the board's decision of November 2014 was carried out. And maybe I did not hear properly, or maybe I didn't understand properly, but my recollection is that earlier, in explaining the non-engagement of PwC, you laid the blame at the feet of the accountant and said that upon the discovery of the disappearance, it became clear why PwC's engagement was delayed. And perhaps I misheard, and if I did, please correct me.
Yeah, I think I was referring to the audit of the financial statements, which was not PwC. The company has our auditors are PKF. And so the documents to facilitate the audit of the 2012 and 2013 financial statements had been with the auditors. They had come in and done their work. And then there were a series of transmittals being exchanged between them and the accountant. And there were several attempts to move it forward, and the reports that I would get is they're waiting on information from the auditor until I took the decision to contact the auditor directly. That's PKF. They came in to meet and said, no, the situation is that we are in fact waiting on information from the accountant. By that time, we had persuaded the board that we were having some difficulty in getting the accountant to be responsive. We brought on an accounting assistant, and we were able to assign that person to work with PKF to ensure that all the information required for their transmitters was in fact being provided. Unfortunately, the accounting assistant did not have access to the full Peachtree system, and so still required the accountant to provide information to get to the auditor. From the time we brought on the new manager, finance and admin in 2017, we were able to expedite that process immediately, get all the information from Peachtree submitted to the auditor, ensure that all the transmitters were responded to. They have since concluded the 2012 audit. They have submitted their report. We have provided it to the Ministry of Finance, and we are waiting a scheduling of the annual meeting to discuss that. And then the 2013 can go ahead. All the information that the auditor has required for 2013, we have now been able to provide. So we are just waiting for them to provide the 2013 report. Once they do that, the others can flow from there, because all the financial statements are ready as soon as the auditors are ready to tackle those years. So that's that part of it. In terms of the internal audit function, yes, there was an issue, and the board decision reflects go ahead and award to PwC based on the evaluation process, subject to the availability of funds to pay the fees. And it was that engagement that took a little time because it wasn't being pursued actively. After I would have written based on the decision of the board to advise PwC that we were engaging them and wanting to move forward with this process. And there was a lull in the change of the board. We have now resumed that process with them.
Following the board's decision in November 2014, whose responsibility was it to engage PwC?
It would have been my responsibility to pursue it, subject to the availability of funds, and I would have notified PwC of their selection.
We're speaking here of an engagement. There's a formal engagement, a letter of engagement that goes to an internal auditor. Was it your responsibility to issue that letter of engagement? And when was that letter of engagement issued?
That I cannot say right now. I'd have to go back to the files and get the dates for the date for the letter.
So, fair enough. Now, I keep hearing of unavailability of funds at a time when $16 million were disappearing. And the third question I asked you was in relation to your role and responsibility. You did not have accounts, audited financial statements for 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16, while this accountant was there. What was, because you joined the company in 2006. This is a company with $10 million in income, the bulk of it from one source, and $9 million in expenditure. So I do not see the complexity in producing accounts. I want to know what was your role for those 5 years when this accountant was failing to produce the documents required to have audited financial statements.
And so, remember, the records will show that this was an issue that was brought to the attention of the board on a regular basis. We did have a board at the time with a finance committee. The finance committee, the chairman, were also working towards getting the information, getting the stuff done. And we were trying to make arrangements. When I asked the board, can we recruit, we needed to have other finance people in the company, because at the time we had just an accountant. And so it was a process of getting board approval to recruit additional staff so that we did not have a finance unit of just one person. And so the records would show that the board minutes, that was regularly raised with the board until we got the approval to do so and started trying to increase the complement of staff in the finance unit.
I just wanted to follow up with regards to the position of Auditor 3 in your submission, and I will direct this now to Deputy PS. In the submission, it says that the PS has recognized the need for a more robust approach to accountability. Therefore, a draft cabinet note has been submitted to the Comptroller of Accounts to establish the post of Auditor 3. So my questions, Deputy PS, would be, why was the draft cabinet note for the establishment of this post of Auditor 3 submitted to the Comptroller of Accounts and not the PMCD at the Ministry of Public Administration?
That is purely one of the requirements for all of these positions that are accounting or accountant-based. The Comptroller of Accounts has to give their non-objection, or they produce their comments first, and then PMCD takes it from there. It's a requirement.
All right. So can you give us an update as to where we are with regards to the approval and filling of this position?
I can only commit to returning to the office to check with the Comptroller of Accounts to find out where they are with our request. Yeah.
Member Mark.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Chairman of East Port of Spain Development Company, through our chairman. Would you agree with me that the East Port of Spain Development Company is struggling to retain some relevance in the context of some of the functions that this company appeared to be executing, which are being executed and performed and provided by a number of other competing agencies. For example, YTEP, the export centers, MUS, NITCO, I think it's NETCO, it's saying NEDCO. Because I'm seeing some of these programs duplicating some of the functions and activities that these agencies were especially established to execute. Could you give me your thoughts on that?
Member Mark, I disagree with you. East Port of Spain is very relevant to the development of that area. It is one of the few organizations that can peruse or go through that area like freely. Maybe I can ask our projects manager, Mr. Aberdeen, to make a comment on this, because he is quite okay around with the entire area and the operations.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, East Port of Spain is a very peculiar place and challenged by what you call border wars, violence, turf. And every institution, save and except us, I'm talking about TNTEC, courts, WASA, every institution needs to have police to come to accompany the operations. Some refuse to go. But East Port of Spain has, based on the engagement, has been able to break that down. We have not had violence at any one of our sites and any one of our functions for the last 10 years. So therefore, we have begun, based on our relationship, we have developed a kinship, a trust, a confidence that people trust us. And therefore, access to them is guaranteed, is trusted, and therefore we have done tremendous work in that regard. The other institutions, if you check the corporations, Samuel Laventel Corporation, the Ministry of Sports, the Ministry of Health, all of the ministries have a difficulty in getting work done. If you look at our implementation record, we'll see it is unquestionable, to the point where people come to us and ask us if we can implement in that area. And this is a consistent program. If you look at the value for money of our performances, our structures, we have a building, let's say we could do a pavilion. Our pavilion might cost 2 million. The very said pavilion will cost 10 million in another area. The very said thing. Our value for money, they accept us because they trust us. And we have, based on our programs, they know that we are being fair. And that is the relevance. And if you look at right now, as on the ground right now, this is the truth all around. They will come to us and depend on us to give us the truth and try our very best.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask, may I continue and ask, the various programs that were identified, whether it is the provision of construction skills, as we were told, coming from these social impact centers, whether it is youth entrepreneurship being provided, catering, upholstering. Could you share with this committee whether these participants, upon the completion of these programs, and I've only identified a few, do they receive any certificates that we can attach some value to at the end of their training exercise? I'm trying to find out from either the chairman or the managing director the kind of certificates, if they do issue them, is it just cosmetic, or is there a relationship with other institutions to give these certificates some relevance in this society for these young people who are emerging with entrepreneurial skills, as the case may be? Yeah. Could you share with us?
I could give you one.
Sure. In relation to the construction skills training program, that's a program that we have designed and are implementing with the assistance of MIC and NESC. And so they have designed the curriculum, the number of hours of training that need to be done so that they issue certification for those programs. And so it ensures that the graduates of those programs are properly certified by those two agencies.
And may I just add,
yes.
Some of these same individuals with that certification have gone on to work with a lot of large, a lot of large contractors. In fact, 2 years ago, we had topping the class for the heavy equipment driver was a female, and I think she's now employed with, I'm not going to advertise the contractor, one of the, the larger civil contractors in Trinidad.
All right. I want to also ask, Mr. Chairman, could you share with this committee what is the selection process? Or I should put it another way. What process is utilized by East Port of Spain in selecting contractors? Do you use competitive bidding? Do you deal with sole select? Do you employ emergency measures under the procurement arrangement that you have under your arrangements? Share with us, how would a small contractor be engaged? How is it done? Is it advertised? Do we have advertisements? Or is it, for instance, done in a sole selective way? That sort of, explain to us, because it's public monies that are involved here.
So we have a variety of methods that we use. So depending on the value of the project, we may go open tender. An advertisement is placed in the daily newspapers, in as many of the daily newspapers as we can afford to, and we advertise and we invite tenders from contractors. And then there are smaller projects that we may within communities, within the community that the project is going to take place, we search our register and we find 6-10 firms that are registered with the company that from that area or can do work in that particular community. And we would invite them to submit a bid. So we would have the tender documents, describe the project, all the specifications, and invite those 6 or 10 firms to submit bids for that project, and then those are evaluated. And then our procurement policy and procurement operating procedures manual allows us also to do a form of community contracting. So there's some of the smaller projects. The chairman was mentioning the latrine eradication project, where there's a fixed design and a fixed cost of about $50,000 to do the project. We go to the contractors with the specifics of it and the cost, and we invite them to say whether or not they can deliver those projects at that cost. So they're not coming up with a price for the project. We have given them the price, and we can still evaluate and select contractors who can do it. So there's several options that we use. On a few occasions, we have done a project with there's a sole select. We recently did a project for the demolition of the former CSO building on behalf of the Ministry of Planning, and we would have done a sole select for the demolition contractor at the time, given the circumstances there. But most times it's either publicly advertised or we select from our register of contractors, invite several contractors to come forward. And we do have a procedure that allows us to use community groups for very small projects. Sometimes it's in 20, 30,000 under that figure, that we may use a registered community group to undertake the project.
Well, could you provide us in writing the following? All contractors that have been engaged by the East Port of Spain from the period 2012 to the present time, and in the categories that you have just described. There are some that are engaged through competitive bidding. The value of that would be, as you suggest, maybe between 2 and 3 million, or maybe you'll identify. Then you have those that are sole select or sole selective bidding or arrangements or tendering issued to small contractors. Then you have a register with community groups that you would engage to offer them contracts because of the value involved. I would like you to provide us with a list. I would like to also ask on behalf of the committee if we can get the value of these contracts in all of the areas that I've identified, and the duration of these contracts, as well as whether those contracts had variances in terms of cost, overruns, so that we will have an appreciation at our level of whether the operations of this company using taxpayers' money is being done efficiently, effectively, and economically, and we are getting value for our monies. Can you also, at this time, provide to us a definite time frame for the submission of outstanding financial audited accounts for 2015? Well, in fact, the last one was in 2012. So could you tell this committee when would you be able, and the company that is, to submit to the Minister of Finance and through him to the Parliament financial audited statement for 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, and 2018, because monies have been expended by East Port of Spain Development Company for all of those years. And this Parliament does not have those accounts, financial audited accounts. So could you give this committee an undertaking as to when those financial audited accounts will come before this Parliament and, of course, the Minister of Finance?
Member Mark, through you, Vice Chair, you wanted a list of contractors from what year? From
2012
to present time. Okay. And secondly, your request for the audited accounts in writing?
No. I would like to know if you can give an undertaking now, because you know what is taking place in the company, and you must be able to share with us when would we get all these outstanding audited financial statements so that the committee would be able to do a proper analysis and assessment of the funds that the Parliament of the Republic of TNT approved for East Port of Spain Development Company over those years. But yet still we are not provided with financial audited statements as to how the money was spent. So I'm just asking if you can give this committee a definite undertaking as to when we can expect those financial audited statements of accounts.
Yes. Unfortunately, I cannot give you a date. What I can say is the information is currently with the auditors, and we have been working with the auditors to try to get a schedule for when they will have the draft of the 2013 audit completed. They have all the information that we've been asked to provide. So we do not at this time have a date from them as to when they can do that. And it is as soon as they submit the 2013 and those are approved by the ministry that we can, because they need the closing balance from those to start the others. So we can work with the auditor to establish a date by when we will have 2013 ready, and then from then to be able to start auditing the others. At this time, we have all the information that we need to be able to move forward with them. Once they're scheduled, they can schedule us.
Could you put in writing? This is a very, very serious matter.
Sure.
I want to let you know. We cannot have outstanding financial accounts for all those years and can't get a definite date from the company. So I would ask you to kindly put in writing to this committee when you discuss this matter with the auditors, when would they be able to complete those reports and have them submitted to the Minister of Finance and the Parliament of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. And as on this matter of internal auditors function, Mr. Chairman, may I ask the chairman of the company, you would agree with me, or should I put it another way? I have asked for the cost to taxpayers for the engagement of this company you call, is it Pierre Young and Associates? That firm that was there from 2010.
Anthony Pear.
Anthony Pear. We would like in writing how much monies were paid to this company for the period that it was engaged. And we'd like that in writing. And we would also like to find out from the chairman of this company whether he's not convinced at this point in time that there is need to have on your establishment, as a matter of emergency and urgency, an internal auditor to conduct the affairs of this organization in a proper and efficient and effective way so that we as a parliament would be able to have some appreciation of what is happening on a day-to-day basis at this company. Do you not agree with me, Mr. Chairman, that the time has come for East Port of Spain to have on its establishment an internal auditor and stop outsourcing dysfunction to firms that I'm sure when you assess the cost, it is more than you would have paid if you had an internal audit unit with one senior auditor and maybe one or two other persons helping. Can you share with us your views on this matter, please?
Member Mark, I share your view that there's a need to have an internal auditor on board. So I've requested of the managing director to get a paper to the board at his next meeting, which is scheduled for the 29th of this month. Some kind of paper requesting or indicating and comparing what our expenses and so will be to continue or to have a contract with the external and with an external supplier as against having on board an internal auditor. That decision will be taken at board level on the 29th of this month.
I'll pause at this time and turn back to the chair.
Chairman, I just want to follow up with regards, I know we spoke about procurement, and I know that in your submission you said in preparation for full proclamation of the procurement legislation, you have engaged a procurement officer who is scheduled to meet with a team from the Office of the Procurement Regulator. Can you indicate when that meeting is supposed to be held?
That meeting took place on the morning of January 15th, so we met with them last week, Tuesday morning.
Would you want to share with us what would have been some of the outcome of the meeting?
Mm-hmm. I think it was necessary for the Office of the Procurement. Well, we initiated the meeting. We asked for the meeting because we wanted to understand some of the company's obligations when the act is fully proclaimed, to make sure that we have the systems in place that we need to have, that we wanted them to be able to review our procurement policy and operating procedures manual in line with the new procurement legislation. So it was a productive meeting in terms of them understanding the conditions under which we operate and why our procurement policy is the way it is, and the arrangements that we have made in our policy and operating procedures manual to facilitate the work of small contractors and community contracting. Coming out of that meeting, I think that the sense was that these things can be accommodated within the new legislative framework once the Office of Procurement Regulation understands the needs of the company and why we're doing certain things. So they will receive our submission, they will look at our documents, they'll ask us to submit those and we will look at them. I think they've also identified a focal point so that we can address further questions too, but there were no challenges in terms of the way we have been operating and whether or not it's in line with what is anticipated in the new legislative framework. I think one of the other concerns, something that we raised with them, is the requirement for due diligence by the company in its procurement functions and ensuring that, for instance, that directors and officers of companies that you engage on a contractual basis can ensure that the directors have no criminal convictions. And we spoke a lot about the challenges of ensuring that that information can be provided to the company, reliable information.
Thank you. You also stated that a new pre-qualification exercise will be carried out. Can you indicate the status of that, whether that has been done, or how soon it will be done?
Vice Chair, we will allow our procurement officer to.
Sure.
Thank you. This submission was only submitted to the Parliament last week, and we met with the regulator on Tuesday the 15th. So coming out of that meeting, we have to revise the manual with the signing officer, and we have to incorporate Section 29 in any further pre-qualification exercise, which is due diligence. That exercise hasn't commenced between the 15th of January and today. It's something that we need to pursue and move ahead with a new exercise going forward.
Thank you. Chairman, if I may, I just wanted to, with your permission, engage Mr. Aberdeen directly based on the previous submission and to take note of the level of engagement with the community and to commend that kind of engagement. But my question really would be, has the company been engaged or approached by other state agencies? Because you did mention that there are other agencies that have difficulty or would be afraid to enter some of these communities. Have you been engaged by some of these agencies to try and find out, what are, for want of a better word, the secrets involved in you being able to establish such a good relationship with the community? And I ask this in the light of other issues that might need to be addressed in that community with regards to interventions in crime and social issues and so on. If I can ask you, what is your take on that?
Mr. Chairman, we have always tried to put as a basis of our policies and our actions involvement of people. What we find is that people tend to say that the community want this and the community want that and the community need this and the community need that, but do not engage them, do not ask their opinion. We have tried to put respect and as a foremost, consultation as a foremost. We have tried always to keep our word, because one of the things that the community generally say, people always promise, but don't keep their promise. We don't make promises that we can't keep, and we always try to explain what are the conditions and the constraints. In terms of other agencies, as I mentioned earlier on, the question of, like, for example, Port of Spain Corporation will ask us, Samuel Laventil will ask us, Ministry of Planning will ask us, even when you talk about the police, the fire services. And if you refer, as an example, with the program that we have on education to production, that is construction skill development, the police will ask us to help in terms of, because they have inefficiency, they have people in the area, they have shortage of human resources. The corporation will ask us to accommodate them. URP will ask us to accommodate people from within the community in the main to help them, involve them in that kind of activity. In terms of the relationships, we have a very good relationships with the police force and the IATF. They will help us in all different ways. And we try our best to be honest, straightforward, and incorporative, recognizing that the primary focus of our attention is the development of our people in the community. And therefore, we always try to involve them at every single level. And that has worked for us, and people have recognized it and have gained a trust from it. So,
thank you for sharing that with us. Member Webster Roy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to go back and do some follow-up on an issue raised by Member Rambarat. And that's around the $60 million and the accountant. I wanted to know what's the duration of the accountant's period of engagement.
He came on board actually with the firm of the internal audit firm. That was his first involvement with the company. And when the firm was no longer able to continue providing internal audit services and we were in need of an accountant, he was recommended and engaged. So it was from about 2011 to 2017.
To 2017. Okay. Who was the accountant's immediate supervisor?
That's the challenge, because we did not have that. The accounting unit was just one person. We did not have, at the time that he came on board, the position of manager, finance, and admin was not filled. And so there was, I would have been the direct supervisor.
It would have been, okay.
Yes.
The position was a contract position?
Yes, all our
positions
positions are.
What's the duration of the contract?
The contracts would have been 3 years.
So he would have roughly received 2 contract periods, right?
Yes.
Okay. My other question, did you have key performance indicators for the employee?
Yes, we do. Yes.
You have, so the accountant had key performance indicators,
Yes.
right? How often did you perform performance appraisals?
Performance appraisals would have been done annually. It's an annual system.
Right. Okay. So you would have noticed a problem in terms of the accountant's performance. Appraisals were done annually, and a second contract period was allotted to the particular individual.
Yeah, actually, when did his contract started in 2011? He came on as he came on as an independent contractor doing a specific amount of work in 2011. The first 3-year contract would have been done in 2012. So it would have gone from 2012 to 2015. And in fact, a second contract was not awarded. He was on a month-to-month basis for the remainder, the duration of his tenure with the company.
So can I still go back to the issue of key performance indicators?
Yes.
If he was on a month-to-month basis, and you would have identified certain challenges in terms of his deliverables.
Yeah.
Why was the month-to-month?
Because the issue from 2015 was a restriction on entering into new staff contracts. And so had we terminated at that time, we did not have approval at that time to enter into new contracts and bring on somebody. So we were trying to see if we can resolve the problem until such time as we were free to hire. So we didn't want to end what we had because that was the only finance person we had in the company.
So I want to ask the ministry something, right? If the managing director would have indicated to the ministry or even the board that they're having a challenge with this particular individual who is on a month-to-month basis of engagement, would that have hindered the ministry, the board, from giving approval for somebody else, even though it was a service provider, somebody else coming in to offer better service to the company and, in an essence, saving the people of Trinidad and Tobago $16 million?
From the point of view of the ministry, the managing director has the authority to engage someone on a month-to-month contract or short-term or service provision. Then I don't see that the ministry would have had a problem with her terminating a particular contractor and engaging a new one on the said short-term or 3-month basis. What we would have had to do if it were the case that a 3-year contract had to be entered into, the ministry would have had to ensure that funds would have been made available to provide for the terms and conditions of that contract.
Sorry?
I know sometimes with some boards you have to get the approval at the board level in terms of how, for positions.
Well, at the time when this board was appointed in December, December 2016, sorry, I met what I would call, let's say, an instruction that any hiring would have to have the approval of the minister. I have made, during that, from then till now, I've been making requests to have various positions in the organization filled.
Okay, I just have one more question, and that's for the managing director. Seeing what would have happened and the outcome, in terms of your appraisal cycle, are you going to stick to appraising people every year, or are you going to introduce maybe quarterly, appraising them quarterly, and then looking at the performance, and if they're not performing, they're not delivering, take necessary action?
It is not an issue of the appraisal cycle. That is really not the challenge. And I think if we talk about the timelines, we will see some of what the challenges are. So it is not a difficult decision to make to terminate someone if they're not performing. We had a situation, I'm trying to get the timelines right. So from 2015, there was a decision that we could not engage new people. There was also a board that was on its way out and was not really the relationship between the ministry and the outgoing board. There wasn't a working relationship. And so that board, having submitted its offer of resignation to a new government, was not in a position to lobby for the recruitment to take place. So it's when a new board was appointed in December of 2016, the board would have received the suggestions of management that we needed to engage, and things were being put in place to fast-track that ability to engage. So we got approval to engage a manager, finance and admin with this board of December 2016. We would have started the recruitment process. We advertised and we interviewed. And so from December of 2016, we were able to make an offer and bring someone on board from September of 2017. And so that's when we were able, as soon as that happened, we were able to pick up on the problem, and we are trying to make arrangements to properly staff the company, especially in that critical unit. Yeah? So there was a challenge with the period between 2015 and December of 2016. It took a while for a new board to be appointed and to get the authority and for them to have that leverage to be able to approve the recruitment that was necessary.
Member Rambarat.
I just wanted to close off with a question to the Finance and Administration Manager, through you, Chairman. Looking at the accounts, I just wanted to know. Just wanted you to explain the project income. It is shown separately on the income statements. I just wanted to know, what is the source of the project income?
You mean the government grant projects?
Yeah.
So that is the income from the PSIP, which is the IDF and the...
Okay, that is your, right, okay.
Yes.
And on your income, where you have management fees.
Right.
What is that for?
The management fees are the income received from the IDF projects, which is the 7.5% for the management of the project and the 2% for the design fees.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
Chair, if I may direct your attention to administrative expenses, and I see that in an effort to reduce administrative costs, that the company has looked at the review of purchase or lease options for various assets, such as telephone system, vehicles, and so on. Can you tell us what were the findings of that review of the purchase or lease options for the various assets?
Sorry, which one? Page?
It's on page 8, going to page 9. It's under administrative expenses. Administrative expenses.
Mr. Chairman, could I direct that to either the manager of finance and administration or the procurement officer, please?
Mr. Chair, what we have realized is that a lot of the expenses in the company, a lot of the assets in the company, we are leasing it. So we have looked at as a buy or lease position to see whether or not purchasing the asset, like for instance, the telephone system or the vehicle, if it will cost the company in the long run less expenditure, sorry.
No, I understand that. So has that comparison been done?
It's ongoing at the moment.
It's ongoing.
So the procurement officer has started the process.
All right. When do you expect that process to be completed?
Currently, we invited quotations for the telephone system, and it's in evaluation right now.
All right. I'm just trying to be clear. So I'm asking about the comparison between purchase.
Right. Well, the
lease.
request was made to the procurement officer. A requisition was made to actually purchase the telephones, and I acted on this requisition. So I guess prior to my engagement in October of 2018, a decision would have been made to purchase these telephones rather than continue to lease it.
So that means that that study has already taken place.
It would have been, as I said, I received a request to purchase the telephone. So I think that would have been, I think the finance manager would have carried out that make or purchase or lease, comparing the cost, the monthly cost to lease compared to the outright purchase of the phone system, the PBX system.
Vice Chair, the decision was made because we will be able to purchase the telephone system in 2 years' time of the lease payment. So the system would have lasted more than 5-10 years. So we decided to purchase the system.
That's the answer I was looking for. Now, with regards to motor vehicles, has a similar study been done with regards to renting as opposed to purchasing?
Yes.
And can you share the findings of that?
We could provide it for you at a later date, please.
All right, I'll take that.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask the chairman this question. You see, the logic that I offered or proffered on behalf of the committee was smoothly executed by the last speaker as it relates to the telephone system. You have done a cost-benefit analysis, and you arrived sensitively and reasonably at the conclusion that it is better to purchase than to continue leasing. Similarly, car rentals. And that is why I submitted to the distinguished chairman the need to revisit paying outsourcing that internal audit function to PricewaterhouseCoopers. Just for the record, you don't have to answer. What I am after is the following from the managing director. Could you tell this committee who recommended this independent contractor, who was the accountant that apparently was responsible for all these irregularities that resulted in this forensic audit ultimately?
He came to the company as part of the Anthony Pear establishment when they were providing internal audit services. During that time that the internal auditor was functioning, we lost the services of the manager, finance and admin, who resigned, and the company was in need of at least an accountant. And it just so happened around the same time Anthony Pear's firm merged and he could no longer continue to provide that service. We were to advertise for an accountant, and this person had been there, was familiar with the accounts, and they recommended, and the board accepted that recommendation to engage him as initially an independent service provider, and then a contract was offered, an employment contract was offered.
The same Anthony Pear and Associates, they are the ones who recommended to you?
Yes.
May I draw your attention to the recommendations coming from the forensic audit? And the item deals with, is on page 2 of your submission on this summary version that we have been provided with. We talked about on page 2, PricewaterhouseCoopers spoke to the issue of the collection and tracking of check books. And I just want to read for the record what is stated here, briefly, Mr. Chairman. All checkbooks should be stored in a cabinet secured in the managing director's office only and locked, and the key maintained solely by the managing director. Specific procedures should also be put in place to limit the likelihood of a reoccurrence of past issues regarding the misuse of companies' checkbooks, particularly as this is currently the company's main form of payment. Could you share with us what were some of these issues that plague the company as it relates to checkbooks that were supposed to be under the control of the managing director? What were some of these past occurrences or issues that were being highlighted by PricewaterhouseCoopers?
Pricewaterhouse made that recommendation following the discovery of the problem. So previously, the checkbooks were with the accountant. The checks were signed, the 2 signatures required by the accountant and the MD, but the checkbooks were retained by the accountant at the time. PwC in January of 2018 recommended that that should change, that there should be a locked cabinet. We have immediately acquired a safe, and that is kept in the managing director's office, and so the checkbooks are kept and stored there with a new process now in place. So as the accountant completes a checkbook, they are returned to the MD. We sign off on it that all the checks have been used, and then the book is put into the safe. A new book is issued. They sign for the new checkbook. So that's a system that has now been put in place based on the recommendation of PwC. Prior to that, the accountant would have ordered the checkbooks from the bank and would have kept control of the checkbooks.
In terms of recommendation number 3, dealing with procedures included in revised financial procedures, we advise that the board approval was needed. Could you advise this committee whether the board
The financial procedures have been developed. They are being finalized to take to the board now, but we have had to do quite a bit of work in ensuring that we have procedures to cover all aspects of our financial operations. Those have been prepared by the finance manager. They're under review by me before they go to the board for approval. So we expect to do that probably by the February board meeting.
Now, could you share with us also recommendation number 6, which spoke to the issue of the absence of audited financial statement, which I referred to, and related expenditure verification, also contributed to unauthorized payments. And they are talking about between the period 2013 to 2017 or thereabouts. Could you share with us what were some of these unauthorized payments that PwC would have been referring to? Unauthorized payments.
Yeah, the method by which the money was misappropriated was a series of unauthorized payments to a firm that's not connected to the company, but was in fact connected to the employee. And the way that was done, we're probably getting into things that are the subject of an investigation, but it was discovered how that was done. And that's how we were able to detect from the time we had a second person come in who was able to look at bank statements and say, what are these payments? And the bank statements did not have.
All right, I understand you. I don't want to compromise
so,
whatever
yes,
is going on
you.
elsewhere. May I ask whether the company is considering, I know it's a small staff, but contract employment, as you know, has its own consequences and implications. Is there any policy on the part of the company to phase out contract employment in favor of permanent employment in the future, or are we stuck with that arrangement of contract employment at the company?
I think this is something that may have to be addressed at the level of the Ministry of Finance. When the company was set up, when the company was being established, we were told that we did not have the opportunity to engage permanent staff, and so all the staff had to be contract staff. So that is something that will have to go back through the Ministry of Finance Investments Division that has oversight of the company. That was not a decision taken internally by the company. It was one that was imposed on us.
All right. And could you also share with us the staff complement would have been 40 in its heyday. It has now collapsed to about...
Sorry, that's not quite accurate. It was never 40. The structure on the organization structure allows for a full complement of 40. Okay. We have never had more than 26 persons on staff.
But would you say that what the objectives of the East Port of Spain Development Company, if these objectives are to be realized within the development plan that you are supposed to submit to Cabinet and make a copy available to this committee, would you say that that particular complement of staff currently existing is adequate, or would you want to share with us new perspectives?
No, we are certain that the current staffing level is not adequate, and that's why we have made an approach to the Human Resource Advisory Committee for approval to fill certain vacant positions and to get us up to closer to our full complement of staff.
And so you are targeting your full complement of 40?
Ultimately, yes.
And you intend to approach the Cabinet through the Ministry to increase the staff level from the current 20 to how many?
On a phased basis, right now we have a request for filling specific vacancies. The chairman mentioned the chief technical officer. We have some other technical staff. We no longer have a business development officer on board. So there are several positions which are highlighted on the organization chart, and we have approached for permission to recruit to fill those. We don't have an HR officer at the moment. What else are we missing that's critical? Accountant, yes, that's one. So we have several priority positions for filling in the first instance. So the intention is not to do all within this financial year, but to certainly fill some critical vacancies and gradually over time get up towards the full complement.
And finally, do you think that the current staff complement, based on qualifications, experience, fit your criteria as it relates to achieving your objectives in the most efficient and the most effective way? Are you satisfied that the current staff complement that you have meet what you consider to be the necessary manpower qualifications required to propel this company properly into the future?
In most cases, we have identified some areas within the projects unit, for instance, where we think we need more technical qualifications in terms of project management and project supervision, construction knowledge. We need some more of that. So we are also looking to advertise to upgrade the level of skills within the projects unit as well.
And what about training of your existing staff to build?
So we do that. We are, in fact, always looking for opportunities for training that will upgrade the skills of the staff in the areas that we consider to be necessary. So we have taken several measures in terms of bringing in people to train our project staff, for instance. We take advantage of training opportunities that are ongoing, offered by various institutions to make sure that we upskill the staff as well.
Do you have a training program? for 2018?
What we do at the start of the financial year, we invite all the heads of section to identify the training needs of their units. And so we put together a training plan based on that so that we can source opportunities for training in the areas that they have identified.
Could you provide us with a copy of that training plan?
Sure.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman.
Member Dinering.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, with respect to the infrastructure development projects, following completion of those projects, you all conduct any sort of oversight to determine whether any repairs or maintenance are needed on these sites?
Could I ask my project manager to respond? But usually at the end of a project, we conduct surveys, and he in a better position to explain.
The answer to the first aspect of your question is certainly that we hand over, on the completion of any specific project, we hand over our project. For example, if we do pavilions, recreation grounds, community facilities, we hand it over to the respective people who are owners of that, whether it's Salmon Lebanon Corporation, the Port of Spain Corporation, the Ministry of Community Development, we hand over the facility. So the question of maintenance is a difficulty for us. We don't carry on after that. What we try to do is to give a maintenance plan of what we suggested, the usage plan. But that we don't have any mandate on that, we don't have any obligation on that from the owners of the facility.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy PS, I'm referring to one of the recommendations in the PwC report with regards to the financial reporting framework, saying that this requires urgent enhancement regarding the content and nature of reports reviewed by the Managing Director and Board of Directors. Sorry, if I can direct this to Chairman first, in terms of how far along is the company in compliance with this recommendation? Yeah, it would be item 7.
Deputy Chair, we have a reporting schedule in line with the State Enterprise Performance Monitoring Manual. I think we have, we don't have the board committee set up as yet because we don't have a full complement of board members. And we have revised the format. Yeah. We have revised the format in consultation or in accordance with the recommendations of the PwC.
So you're compliant with those recommendations now?
Yes.
Yeah. So if I can direct the next question to Deputy PS in terms of the oversight mechanisms for the board, can you give us a sense of what oversight mechanisms are in place currently, in terms of reporting from the board, for example?
Mr. Vice Chair, the Ministry is guided by the State Enterprises Performance Monitoring Manual. But in addition to all that's set in there, internally, we have committees that would treat with the decisions of the board. So, for example, 1 week after confirmation of minutes, it would be sent to us at the Ministry, and the Ministry would review those minutes with a view to keeping ourselves abreast of the decisions that have been taken at the board level. And ever so often, the Permanent Secretary can request that the auditors review any particular transaction. Additionally, as I said in the opening statement sometime previously, an officer from the Economic Research and Planning Unit is tasked with the responsibility to review the operations of each of the agencies under the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. So EPOS is one, so there's an officer identified to review the transactions, the submissions, and so on of the East Port of Spain Development Company.
one cannot help but go back to the issue with the $16 million issue and to ask whether at any time during the period that this occurred, whether the ministry would have had reason to send an auditor to the company based on the submission of information.
I would have to check the records to confirm that. At this point, I am not in a position to see.
Chairman, again, I just want to refer to the whistleblowing policy and to note that the company does not have a whistleblowing policy. And your justification for that in your submission is that the need for whistleblowing implies that the company is complicit in wrongdoing and or does not act to address issues that are raised by the staff. I'm just wondering whether, if there was a whistleblowing policy in place, whether that issue of the $16 million would have been somehow averted. I would just want to ask your opinion on that.
Yeah, and we do not have a whistleblowing policy. Whether or not that, I don't know that that would have been required for another member of staff who may have noticed something to say that they had noticed something going on. But we had not had anybody coming forward to say that they recognized that there was some irregularity. There's no reason to believe that they did not do that because of some fear of repercussion, that it might have been done had there been a whistleblowing policy to cover them in some way. That we will not know. That's probably a hypothetical situation. But usually if there's a problem, somebody sees that there's a problem, they would report it to management and then we can investigate it further. That did not happen in this case.
Would you agree then that a whistleblowing policy shows some sort of company commitment to transparency?
Sure, and we can work towards developing one, yes. We're happy to do that.
Member Ramrat.
Thank you, Chair, through you. Just on the issue, because we are required to examine the issue of internal controls. I'm just following from what the Deputy Permanent Secretary reported. You may or may not be able to answer this question, but I've seen the expressions in relation to the 16 million. I've seen it being described as the disappearance. That was December 2017. I've seen it described as an unauthorized vendor being involved. I've seen it described as unauthorized payments. I've seen it described as forged checks. So from an internal control point of view, and you may or may not be able to answer it, is this a case of transactions involving electronic transfers? Does this involve forged checks? Is it authorized payments to an unauthorized vendors? What is it?
There were no electronic transfers. As you would have seen in the PwC report, there were signatures forged on checks. There was no authorized vendor, and there were no authorized payments.
So this is a case of forged checks.
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Mark.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, could I ask the Managing Director and the Chairman to consider an internal fraud policy for the company? I think that just as the whistleblower policy is something that you'll want to consider, I would ask that you consider devising, formulating an internal fraud policy. And my final area that I'd like to address is the following. I did ask earlier to provide some information on the contractors, but I just wanted to reiterate another area which will focus on your major projects, and covering the period 2015 to the present time. The following I would like, on behalf of the committee, to secure from your company the name of these projects, that is the major projects, the names of these projects, the initial estimated costs of these major projects, the actual cost of these projects, the percentage of these projects completed, the completion date, and the cost, which would be the final cost of these projects, and the challenges you may have experienced, if any, as it relates to these major projects, as I said, covering the period 2015 to the present time.
Member, can you clarify if that is different to the information provided at the Appendix 11?
No, it's a little different. These are major projects.
Also.
You might remember you have many projects.
Yes, but all the projects are included in the appendix here, so you'd like us to extract for the major?
I'm just trying to give you a framework for your guidelines, for your guidance.
So, member, are we to eliminate some of these projects?
No, you're not
this appendix?
any. All are included. All I'm saying, Mr. Chairman, is that.
So you want us to add another column where we have changed the column that's cost and put initial cost and put another column final cost.
Yeah.
And then you
and then challenges, if any.
Any challenges.
Right. So at least you maintain the framework in terms of major as the case may be.
So if there are no further questions from the members of the committee, can I now invite you, Chairman, if you want to bring any closing remarks?
Vice Chair, I would just like to say I hope that we were able to satisfy some of your, or allay some of your fears and that of Member Mark's fear of the relevance of this company to the particular zone within which the company is required to perform its duties. And I hope that you go away with the impression and the feeling that, and agree with me, that the company is relevant to the operating area. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Deputy PS, can I invite you to the final comments?
Thank you, Vice Chair. And I too would like to endorse the comments of our Chairman of our Board of Directors and to use this opportunity to thank staff of EPOS and the staff of the ministry for helping us to prepare to treat with your inquiries. I can only trust that what we have offered meets with your approval and to commit to providing the documentary responses as soon as Ms. Jacobs provides us with your transcript of exactly what we're required to produce.
Thank you very much. So on behalf of the committee, I would like to thank each member here for making the time and effort to appear before this committee and for providing the answers requested and for the level of discussion and engagement, and trust that our own input would have been of value to the operations of the committee and the ministry. So the members from the East Port of Spain Company, Chairman George, Dr. Thomas Austin, Managing Director, Mr. Michael Aberdeen, Project Manager, Mr. Rennie Mohan, the Procurement Officer, and Ms. Nissa Hosten, Manager of Finance Administration, and of course the officials from the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, Deputy PS, Mr. Ramuta, Dr. Ray's Program Coordinator, and Ms. Antoine, Senior Economist. So again, I want to thank you and to wish you a very safe journey home, and to now say that you're excused.